I was like,
You're
what?
fine. I don't know why you're nervous.
Starts to flow.
You love talking.
Yeah.
When people...
Oh, it's so good.
Good.
It's so good. No, a lot of good things happening in this program, and it really is. It's nice for people to know. So,
All right.
I don't think immersion kids get the respect they deserve, brother. It's hard work doing school.
Yeah,
And
it is.
I mean, imagine that. You just think like Hebrew or whatever. Like if we sat you down the heart. By the way, now we're gonna do this thing. You're gonna do your day in Hebrew.
Okay, but
Enjoy that. You know, like,
that's where it takes people, the teachers, and the culture and the passion that they bring to the programs because you bring it to life, and it's not just grammar and vocab anymore. It's like
You're still getting this right. Okay. Good.
Oops. He's gonna edit that in before the thing.
No, yeah, we do a little bit of a kind of intro before the intro, and
yeah,
so that's good.
That's true.
yeah,
It is true. It's very true.
brings it to life for them. So
Okay.
I mean, so let's get one more thing in here. I'll just add.
One more
We're
thing.
just gonna keep going. I gotta get on the mic now.
get him to stop now.
Let's Chatty Cathy over here. No,
Somebody wound him up.
this idea. What I love about, and it's not just Spanish, right? It's really any language. You never have pigeonholed yourself. Like it's an incredible amount of work. These kids are working so hard. Their teachers are working so hard to produce something on less materials, less time than what their peers have, and to succeed at a high level. And we're doing it.
Yeah.
And we're doing it. There's really not a negative though to that.
Yeah.
They come out on top, no matter what field you go into. Be that construction, be it a medical facility, be it wherever you're going.
Oh, that instills the confidence.
The mission,
It does.
the mission field, wherever you're going, either the cultural, relational skills that you've learned, the language itself, these things are invaluable. It doesn't matter where you're headed.
Yeah.
Okay, you can edit that
All
one
right. We
in.
got
See you,
that.
love you, bye.
Welcome to the Pointe podcast. The Pointe is brought to you by NorthPointe's Bible Department as an outreach for NorthPointe Christian Schools and for outside listeners curious to know more about the grand story of God and the Bible. We're so glad you joined us. So let's just get to the point.
All right. I want to welcome you back to the Pointe podcast. We're glad to have you again with you and here at NorthPointe Christian. And we're going to be talking about Spanish Immersion today. This is a program here we've had at NorthPointe Christian for a number of years, and we're going to talk about how this unique program is really shaping students academically and culturally and spiritually. So we want to thank you for joining us today. We have as our guest Dennis Caboose, a friend of mine, and he's been here for a number of years in the middle school. And then the director of Spanish Immersion, and I know I'm going to call this spiritual emphasis at some point in time because it sounds a little bit like that, but there is a spiritual emphasis in Spanish Immersion for sure. And this is Amber, and I want to get the name correct. Let me try
Craig.
Young Craig. Thank you
go.
for stepping in there. It doesn't sound like a Spanish name.
no, it's Dutch.
Could you tell us a little bit about yourself, Amber?
Yes, my name is Amber Youngcraig. I've been working at NorthPointe for I think this is my 13th year here. I started off teaching Spanish Immersion in second grade and then moved into the Spanish Immersion coordinator role. Yeah.
Okay.
What else do you want to know?
Well, you're married,
Yes,
right?
yes.
Okay. What was your maiden name?
Yes, my maiden name was actually Banks.
Banks.
Also
Okay.
not Spanish.
No, but you are Spanish, with Spanish
Any
heritage.
Latina in there?
Oh, yeah,
somewhere?
yes. My mom's side, De La Luz.
Okay, there we go.
Yep. So my grandparents spoke Spanish. They actually did not teach their kids Spanish, though. So my mom and aunts did not grow up speaking Spanish. And so I learned it in school, but always had a passion for wanting to learn the language because of my grandparents.
Okay. And you have kids?
I do. I have two little girls, 4.5-year-old and a 16-month-old.
Okay. Well, it's nice to get a little bit of background about you. I want to ask a little bit about our program here. Exactly what is the Spanish Immersion program here at NorthPointe Christian? How does it work in a Christian school setting? Just maybe kind of start us out with that.
Yeah. So it's really just an educational approach. So everything that they're doing in the Spanish Immersion program is done through Spanish. So they're reading, writing, teaching math, Bible. They're having conversations with their friends, with their teachers, all just through Spanish. So the goal is really that by the time that they graduate, they are fully bilingual with Spanish and English.
Okay.
And bicultural, biliterate, all of those.
Okay, and how young do you start? I've heard something about a puppet. Can you kind of maybe elaborate on that?
Yes, yes, the English-speaking puppet. You've got it.
Okay, all right.
So we have students start as early as 3 years old, and they can join through first grade. And we always, just to kind of ease into just school in general, we want students to feel comfortable and that they're safe and loved and they know what's going on in the classroom. So there's an English-speaking puppet that comes out so that their teacher is not the one speaking English. The puppet speaks English. And so after they've established the rules and all those things to make the kids feel comfortable, then the puppet goes away and it's just Spanish only.
Well, that sounds something to be really engaging
Yes.
for the kids. And then who's the teacher that is at the younger levels with that?
That would be preschool through first grade. And then by the time they're in second grade, they don't start the year with any English in the classroom. It's all Spanish from day one.
Okay. All right. Dennis, you have anything you'd like to...
Yeah, I just, it sounds maybe funny to, have this puppet that comes out and speaks English, but it really goes to the integrity of what we're trying to do, and that is to build in a classroom environment where the kids understand the importance of staying in the language.
Okay.
Right? That we're trying to grasp or to gain. It's important that throughout all levels, even up to where I am, so I'm...
no puppets in your classroom?
6th and 7th grade. And no, we don't have to draw out the puppets, but we do have to stay in language. And that's important to get that foundation, right? To get that start. But it's common, in these programs all around that there are some things at the very beginning. And this puppet idea is the way that is generally accomplished is my understanding, yeah.
And I'm assuming the puppet has a name.
Yeah, it depends on the classroom.
Okay.
So you'd have to ask the classroom teachers what their puppet name is.
Okay, all right. So no name across the board. It just depends on the classes what they actually name the puppet. Okay.
In some classes, they'll have a little sign in their room that says English time or something visual that the kids know too. If an English speaker comes into their room, they can speak English, and then when they leave, they turn that sign off. Or so the kids always know what language they're speaking at a given time.
All right, very nice. And then as far as faith being integrated, and we try in every subject area here at NorthPointe Christian to integrate faith with whatever the subject matter is. So in the Spanish Immersion curriculum, can you give us kind of an example of how maybe the spiritual formation happens in Spanish and cultural studies and things like that?
I think you're right. It is in just every subject area that we do at NorthPointe. So no matter what classroom you're in, whether it's in English or Spanish, that's going to be woven into everything that we're doing. And so I think in the Spanish Immersion classes, the students are getting that regardless of what subject they're learning. So if they're doing reading, if they're doing math or science, the focus is going to be on God, the biblical truth, and the language. So they're not just doing their content and biblical knowledge in there. You have that with the language.
Yeah,
I could give some examples.
Definitely give an example. Just recently, I mean, one of the major themes I teach is 6th grade ancient world civilizations class, and societies have always formed around water, fresh water specifically, right? Transportation, many other things that is important for, obviously drinking, food, vegetation, all these things. And so we just recently did a lesson where we said, hey, if water is so important, well, what about the living water? And then we did a little Bible study during history class where we talk about how Jesus Christ wants to give us the living water.
Yeah.
And we read the story of the woman at the well.
And of course, you're reading that in Spanish, right?
Of course, yes.
Everything.
Yes, yep. And the students help. And then we have this class discussion about that. So that's just one example, right? One thing that we're learning where you kind of do the intersection of faith and life, as our friend Dan always talked about.
Yeah.
So, like, you know what? If civilizations have to thrive on this water, then we have to have this living water if we want to thrive.
Yeah. Wow. That's great. Now, as far as, again, with the spiritual formation, have you seen students' faith kind of grow through these things, the cross-country? Do you have any examples maybe that come to mind?
Yeah. So years ago, there was a student when I was teaching second grade who she, as a 7 or 8-year-old, felt like God was really placing on her heart mission work. And so she convinced her family to go on a trip to Guatemala. And so she was in the Spanish Immersion program and was able to make connections with kids there when they were on this mission trip. And that actually connection spurred other families to join them and going on a trip to that same place. And then a group of us staff members went to this same organization, Hope of Life International. And 2 summers ago, we had a group of Spanish Immersion students and families. What were there?
Some 50 something of us. Yeah.
50 and staff members went on this mission trip during the summer. And there was so much excitement just to be able to use their Spanish in such a tangible way and make connections with the people they were interacting with. And Dennis was able to go on that trip with those students.
Amazing. So you have the service component, right, of going, but also in there, right, the mission mandate, which we're going to share the gospel through our actions, through Vacation Bible School, through gifts of love towards these folks. But at the end of the trip, for that spiritual impact, how did it affect our group? We saw 20 plus baptisms there. Kids that said, you know what, now is the time for me to stand up and just publicly make this choice for Jesus Christ. And that led also to what is culturally hard sometimes for the Guatemalan kids, a few of them also to do that, seeing that their American friends were making that choice. So definitely another example, I'm working with a senior mentee this year, and this young lady just shared with me, they were just on their spring break, right? And they went to, a mega store, and I think they were in Mexico, down in Cabo San Lucas, and they made this little trip to the superstore, whatever it is, the Costco that would be, and they said, well, we're just going to grab up these things and go off into one of these villages that's around. And so they did that. It provided to the people, obviously, many gifts and many things. They were able to provide water for, like 4 families for a week for some $80. Now, you and I would blow that on pizza with our family probably and not think too much about it, right? But it also did, one of the most important things was that it connected this young woman with some people, right? And actually, she got an invite to come back.
Is that right?
And she's thinking she may go back down and do some more work there as a college student, if the Lord might lead that way. So definitely, language is something that cannot really be separated from who we are, right? It's part of our cultural identity. It's part of who we are. And it just opens the door. And I feel like there's something in that God has put in us, a need to have that connection with people. And we can touch on, as we go through here, maybe a little more about why that's so important. But it transfers into so much of what we do.
No, I don't think there's any doubt about that. I would say, too, that the idea of the mission trips kind of thing for a student who's been in the Spanish Immersion program and just learning it here, and then the excitement, maybe even, but the apprehension of going, and it's like, well, now I've got to put this into practice in real life situation kind of thing. And I don't know Spanish. I know some Hebrew, and we would take a trip to Israel. I used to do some Israel trips, and just the opportunity to be able to use what Hebrew I knew and to be able to speak and then learn more on top of that. And then you come back not only more enriched, but I think with better language skills and kind of knowing.
Yes, and there's something about that authentic audience, that authentic situation, something that's very impactful, which embeds that language in a different way.
Yeah.
Right? It's not like when you're maybe in your Hebrew class or in your Spanish class where you're trying to just memorize a list of things and reproduce it. It's a very different experience.
Yeah.
And on such a deep level that it really ties you to like that experience, and your language is tied to that. It's a lot harder to lose at that point.
Yeah. And where are some of the places that you've gone? You mentioned Guatemala. Any other places that you guys have gone and done this kind of thing?
Well, not with students, no. So it's a very good setup, the relationship that we have with Hope of Life International there in Guatemala. They can accommodate what we're doing, and so that has been like we go back there. We've been there twice.
Okay.
This will be our second time with a large group
Yep.
of students.
And when are you guys going again?
We will be, what is it, June 7th. I'm going
Yeah.
June 6th. They're going June 7th.
Yep.
And how many will be going on that?
This time we have about 60
Wow.
students, so it's only for Spanish immersion students with their families if they choose,
Okay.
and some staff members.
And what grades are these students in?
Majority, I would say, middle and high school,
Yeah.
but some
Yeah.
younger siblings get to go as well if their families are going.
Okay.
So we have some from the elementary school as well.
Okay. And what about you guys personally? Where else have you been in kind of Spanish immersion type of places that?
Well, we've touched on, Amber has a little bit of a background right here. I'm just I'm a cheap knockoff, I guess you could say.
Right. No, you are the original.
Right? No, but
Nothing cheap
so
knock
there's
off the
nothing
back.
in my family history that would say, hey, this guy should speak Spanish. No, I was in 9th grade and decided, no, actually 10th grade, correct that. 10th grade, decided I'd take Spanish 1, and I just something about it. But really what seized that for me, what really bound me to the language was that I met a couple of friends. Right.
Okay.
And then I could use my little bit of Spanish from my Spanish class. And so it all starts for me just in a high school classroom. I didn't have immersion. That wasn't a thing when we were in school, you know. I'm like, what's this immersion deal?
Yep.
Then I met my wife at age 17, 18, and she's from the Dominican Republic. So
Okay.
that's one. Now I have one Latin connection over here.
Yep.
My friends in high school were Mexican, so I have some
Right.
Mexican Spanish in my. And then I attended for about 10 years Spanish church. So
Okay.
instead of going to church in English, I went to church in Spanish, and lots of Puerto Rican, Cuban, Dominican influence there. And I lived for a short time in Nicaragua.
Okay.
So and I visited Mexico many times. Once you get the cultural piece,
Yeah, mhm. The cultural
and that's
piece
why I
is
said, but we could
huge.
circle back to the relationships,
Yep.
because I think the relationship is what draws you in to stay, right?
Yep.
That is just it cannot be overstated. When you get connected to who these people are, and you find the value in another human being
Yep.
and in the culture that they have.
And it's the vision of the church. I mean, it's the vision that Christ had for the church, is that this united, no matter what culture, what language. And when we get to the Book of Revelation, of course, all the languages and cultures and all their celebrating and glorifying God.
Amen.
Yeah.
Amen.
Anyway, places that you've been. And
Yeah, so I haven't been to, I guess, as many places, but I did, when I was in college, my major was Spanish and Spanish education, and I studied abroad in Buenos Aires, Argentina.
okay.
So I lived with a host family there, and I feel like that's where I really felt more confident in my language skills than coming back from that time
Okay.
studying abroad. So
Can I just add one other thing?
Yeah.
Todd, with
No, I'm sorry. You're talked enough now.
this? Well, I know. One and done. One and done. But this idea, I just want to point out that my language skills, obviously, they got a lot better after post wife. I was also married to this young lady at 18. So when I really got tied into that, when I started going to that Spanish church on a weekly basis. But I just want to say that I learned my Spanish without an immersion program right here in Grand Rapids. And so one thing that I would recommend to anyone who's interested or has a kid in the immersion program or is interested in having or utilizing the area around it. There's so many Spanish speakers. There's so much available right here in Grand Rapids. If we will just break from our normal activity
Right.
and do something a little different. And I was so blessed by that because you can find it right here. You may not have the experience. I didn't have the experience as a college student to go live abroad.
Right.
I found it here in Grand Rapids.
Yeah.
And so just to bring that
And so we offering here at NorthPointe Christian an opportunity for parents to enroll their students. Tell me some of the things that when prospective students come in for the Spanish immersion, some of the hesitations that they may have that need to be overcome.
yeah, I think it probably depends on at what level or what age. So when we're thinking of students joining the program for the first time, that's really young ages, 3 through what is first grade, like 6 years old. So a lot of times parents haven't even seen what an immersion classroom might be like. So I would encourage them to come on a tour and see what it's like, get a feel for it. see the kids hanging out in their classroom, laughing, joking, having fun with their teacher and their friends. I mean, it's just like school, just in Spanish. And so some of the hesitations or some of the questions that we get that are really common, like, what about when are they going to learn English if they're learning Spanish right off from the beginning?
How do you answer that?
Yeah, so in our program, it's a bilingual program, so it's English and Spanish both. So we are very intentional when we introduce English instruction, and that's in 3rd grade in our program. And there are things that like don't exist in Spanish, things that wouldn't transfer. For example, something that does transfer. In English, we read left to right. Same in Spanish. We read left to right.
Hebrew would be different.
There you go. So we don't have to teach them that because they already know that when they're learning to read in Spanish. So in math, do you use the Spanish numbers or the English numbers? So the numbers are written the same way. They have different names though.
Okay.
But
all right.
It's very similar with like reading or something like that. And so something that they would need to teach them are, let's say, the silent E at the end of a word. That doesn't exist in Spanish. So that's something we would teach them in English.
Right. But the syntax is basic. Is it basically the same? The syntax and grammar?
Your formation of sentences, subject, verb.
Yeah.
You know,
it might be the order
things,
different.
The adjectives, there's a little bit of a different order for some words. But again, a lot of things are going to transfer. We wouldn't have to actually spend a lot of time teaching some of those skills. And we can do that in the later elementary grades. And so we keep them in because we need the foundational language of the Spanish in order to continue to be able to run the classroom and have them doing all of that. So they push those non-transferable skills. They can be taught. They just choose to do it later.
Right.
But you also have to remember, the brain is a miraculous thing. What God has done is just amazing. So they're in Spanish immersion at the elementary level, let's say those first few years for, let's say, 6 hours. Right? They're getting that input.
Yep.
The rest of the day, they're getting English input. So the brain is figuring out so many things anyway. They see text all around them on a daily basis, TV screens, other places. They're going to see all that stuff in English. And so you have, even though the school time is dedicated for the Spanish, it has to be because there's a limited amount of input coming with that. And we have to control that very carefully. But the rest of their life is coming at them in English. So the deficit wouldn't be as much as someone might think it would be.
Right. Is there a really kind of and I know probably like senior year, but is there really kind of a too late to enter the Spanish immersion program? And at what point in time do you think that is?
So for us, we have a cutoff so they can enter through 1st grade. So we wouldn't, if they hadn't been in another Spanish immersion program before 2nd grade, we wouldn't let a student, just because they would have lost that much language input. They wouldn't have been exposed to it by the time they're in 2nd grade. It would be a lot harder to catch up by that point.
Okay, so we're really looking at talking to parents from who have kids that are about 3 years old, you said, until about the 1st grade period of time here at NorthPointe.
And or, Todd, those that want to come, and we do get students that join, but they're joining for other reasons, and they're coming to us from maybe the local public school. Because there are plenty of places where they can get an immersion education, but it might not be the Christian immersion education.
Right. And again, the importance and the difference, the distinction here at the Christian school is we're weaving our life of faith and our stuff of life and those interconnected things.
Exactly. So we still do draw some folks, but they have to have already been in a program because they have to have the foundational language skills to be set up for success. We would be setting them up for failure otherwise. So,
and it just made me think, for these students, they're learning language as a means of communication. So it's not just, listen to these numbers, I can count to 10, listen to this, I know the colors in Spanish. Like, it's a way for them to communicate. So they're speaking, they're making connections, they're building relationships with their teachers or their peers. And so building on that from those early years is going to set them up for success as they go on through the program, as they go into middle and high school, where it looks a little bit different. They have about half of their day in Spanish compared to majority of their day in Spanish in the younger years. And then as they get older and more mature, they're able to do more difficult tasks in Spanish as well, read deeper texts, have debates, those kind of things that they just don't have the maturity or the academic vocabulary to be able to do that at a younger age like they can once they get to middle and high school.
Right. And where do you kind of see this program going? What's your vision for the Spanish immersion here at NorthPointe Christian, maybe that still has yet to be realized?
It's interesting because although our program started 12, 13, 14
a group already,
years ago, each year we've added on one grade level. And so the very first graduating class was only last year.
Okay.
And so I feel like each year we're growing, we're reevaluating where our immersion program is headed. And one of the big things is we want to keep adding those cultural connections and getting kids outside of this building and making connections with the community here.
Is that happening right now? Are there places where you're going out into the community here and having those experiences?
Yeah, we have our mission trip, which is a huge one abroad.
Yep.
We have we have a connection for our juniors and seniors that we partnered with Cornerstone, and so we have a partnership with a college professor who comes on our campus and teaches kind of like a dual enrollment program for our Spanish immersion students. And so through that, we've been able to also, like an excursion, I guess, make some connections. Where did we go this fall?
To the flamenco.
To a flamenco
presentation.
Yep. And so we have some of those. And then we're planning on making more connections with just Hispanic businesses. There's so many in the Grand Rapids area.
That's something we're planning actually
this spring.
What do those connections look like? I mean, you see Spanish businesses. What? How would the students be involved in something like that?
Well, this original is kind of my kind of activity that I'm trying to come up with. Just again, I just want, because I already mentioned my experience started right here in Grand Rapids. Like, there are just so many places where you can find the culture, you can speak the language, you can meet the people. And so really what I'm trying to do is to just get them out and it's just a quick introduction. We're going to go out and we're going to go around Grand Rapids and we're going to see and meet people in these different Latino-owned businesses. And just, it's kind of like a scavenger hunt, right? We're going to go out and we're going to find some people. We're going to find some things. Yeah. And so that's just again, to just open their eyes to the fact that, because a lot of these friends, our Spanish-speaking friends and neighbors, are not in the places that some of us go to regularly, right? You might have to step into another side of your community to find them.
Is this something that would be, like, we have a J term here, so in January, we have an opportunity for a week to teach something a little bit different, to do something different. Is this kind of a possibility for like a J term, or is this something you're thinking of working into your curriculum? It
could become something more like that. In this first iteration of what it is, essentially I'm just trying to get the kids with me out of the school for a day this spring. And so before we wind up the year, to take them out and about, and we're just going to go explore. And meet some of our friends and see the businesses that they own, and in that they will find cultural foods and drinks and other things, but really just to connect them before they leave Mr. Cabooses' class to a little bit about how did I find a love for this language.
Yeah. Very cool.
Did you mention some of the cool opportunities that come along with successful completion of our Spanish immersion program? Because I don't know that we got that far yet.
I don't think we did. Okay, let's go back there. So one thing that we have been able to do is make, like I was saying, make that connection with Cornerstone. We were looking at how can we provide our Spanish immersion students more opportunities in high school when they graduate. So one of the things that we can do is apply for them with the state to get the seal of biliteracy on their diploma when they graduate. So that sets them apart from other students who are not bilingual, who have not spent all this time studying another language. And so that's one thing. Another thing is that we have that partnership where we give students the opportunity to graduate high school with a minor in Spanish. So what that looks like is we have a professor from Cornerstone come over and teach these classes, these college level classes with our students here on campus, so they don't have to go to a college to take them. They're doing it right here. And they take one per semester. And by the time that they graduate, they have enough credits.
So part of our dual enrollment with Spanish Immersion. Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Right.
Yep. So those are kind of two things that can set them apart as they're looking onto, okay, where am I going next after I graduate from NorthPointe?
What a blessing. I mean, to leave high school with a Spanish minor. I mean, it's pretty awesome. So,
Well, we're kind of wrapping up here, unless you have another question you'd like to ask before.
well, I just wanted to just emphasize that partnership is so important, right? When parents sign up for the immersion program, and you mentioned, like, what are some of those fears that they might have? Like, one of them, quite practically, is how on earth, if I'm a non-Spanish speaking parent, how on earth am I going to help my kid? How can I do that? You know what? And my big piece of advice when I touch on this, just stay locked in. You may not be able to read my plans, right? Because I'm catering to your child. Your child needs to gather and receive information in Spanish. So all of when I open my Schoology account, it's all in Spanish. Everything I've posted there is in Spanish. Okay. And that's just good practice. So that happens in my non-immersion classes too, in a way that kids should be able to understand it.
Right.
But I need them to communicate and to think and to process this language.
Yep.
So you might say, well, a parent would say, how can I deal with that? Well, a great opportunity for you to sit down with your child then and say, hey, explain to me about this.
Yeah.
I don't know what that says. What is this?
Yeah.
And obviously there's a lot of tools out there where parents can use those tools. If that is not an option, the best option, again, is to sit down with your kid and be locked in.
Right.
And know. But another thing is that parents can play a big role. There's a lot of things that happen outside of school that you can play a huge role by maybe being intentional, is the word I want to say. Being intentional with the things that you do with your kids. I mentioned there's a lot of neighborhoods that you might not normally go into in Grand Rapids, that you could go into those neighborhoods intentionally and find the Mexican store or the international store, right? Or to visit El Vocero newspaper.
But to give you an opportunity to practice your skills, to get to know the culture, to, again, just impact your world for Jesus Christ in those ways.
And we need to go into all the world. And some of that world is not far off.
Yeah,
some of it's right close. And also, I mentioned the young lady that on her spring break trip decided they were going to make an impact, right? So plan your vacations. Aruba might look nice, but maybe Nicaragua's a good place to go visit. Yeah. Might be a better deal too, by the way.
Yeah, I would assume.
Might be a better deal. Anyway, so just that, like the intentionality to be in it, to be locked in with your kids as they're going along, super duper important point that I would just try to drive home, because sometimes it's like we want Ron Paul Peele, set it and forget it, and it's really not always the best practice, you know.
Well, Amber, do you want to add something to that, or do you like to talk a little bit more about, before we wrap up here, something that would be interesting or interested parents would want to know?
Yep, for sure. Once you choose Spanish Immersion or for your kid, you're choosing this at such a young age. So as they go through, as they're growing in middle school, and maybe they just want to be like the rest of their peers, and that's just the middle school age anyways.
Yep.
Remember why you chose Spanish Immersion for your kid, what opportunities you're providing them to have another language, have another way to connect with people and build relationships. And you just open those doors that you might not know where God's going to lead them in the future. But by being bilingual and having just another language, another way to communicate with people, you can have such a bigger impact. And so remember that why you chose that over the years. And as, things go up and down and you never know where life may take you throughout those high school, middle school years, but just go back to that and encourage your kids as, they may be struggling with things too. But I think it's just such an important decision.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I think it's been a great interview today. I want to thank again Dennis Caboose for being here with us.
You're welcome, brother.
Your
Thank
contribution, not only to the podcast today, but here at our school, is invaluable. And I thank you very much. And Amber Young Craig, I got that. All right. So anyway, having you here as well. Thank you very much for coming in. So we hope you got the point today. I want to thank you again for being with us, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Point. I'm your producer, Alex Sigma. And if you enjoyed the episode, be sure to rate us on Spotify and share this podcast with others. You can also subscribe to us on YouTube or follow us on Spotify. We'll see you on the next episode.